Why don't I believe in God? I think the main reason why I don't believe in God is because I consider it to be dishonest. And the reason I consider it to be dishonest is because the concepts, the attributes that theologians attach to the idea of God are incompatible with the things that we observe in nature. If I am actually going to take nature, the order of the universe, as a premise for my belief in God, then I'm going to arrive at a very different kind of deity than what has been presented through historical religions. For example, I would not just believe in a God, and there's a very good reason why I would not believe in a God. Whenever we observe complexity in the universe that is the result of agents, the higher the level of complexity, and also the larger the scale of the complexity, we usually find a multitude of agents attached to the creation of this complexity. And if the universe is exceedingly complex beyond our comprehension, and it is, why would we attribute this vast complexity to a solitary entity? It doesn't make any sense. It's dishonest. But we should, in fact, be thinking in terms of a plurality of creators, a plurality of engineers. And in what sense are these beings creators or engineers? They're creators or engineers not in any supernatural sense. That doesn't make any sense at all. They're creators and engineers in a super sense. So just like a Kodiak bear in relation to a man has tremendous greater amount of strength, and in relation to a human, that strength is vastly superior to a human's strength. And so what we would be talking about is we would be talking about some type of superior beings that had a superiority of engineering, of understanding of technology, of whatever it might be, that were responsible for the existence of the universe. And this higher capacity would not imply mysterious spirituality. It would not imply a supernaturalism, but as we observe everything else in nature, these beings would very likely equally have a contingency to them, which is to say they would very likely they wouldn't be immortal, they wouldn't be eternal. This makes no sense. This is dishonest. To try to posit these human ideals, these human constructs, as what the creators of the world that we observe, to try to posit these idealistic creators as the origin of the universe that we observe, is dishonest, because it is not compatible with what we observe in nature. So we have no way of knowing whether or not these beings are still alive. A whole bunch of attributes that we don't want them to have would necessarily be assigned to them. It would at least not fall out of the probability of them having these attributes. And we don't want this. Another thing, the idea of goodness and love and justice is contained idealistically in the historical religions of the world. This is not something we could apply to any of these deities that would have been responsible for making the universe. And why not? Because the very concept of justice and goodness and all of this stuff is placed in contrast. It's generated through a contrast of what we find in the world, but these creators would have been responsible for what we find in the world. So it's very hard to conceive that these idealistic attributes that the world's historical religions have would in fact apply to the creators of the universe. Because the very contrasts of injustice that we use to make sense of these notions, these idealistic notions we have, these deities are responsible for that imbalance. They're responsible for the things that bring about these conditions. So I think it would be a lot more honest to conclude that these deities, these higher beings, they would not have any sense of morality in the sense that we have morality in our cultures. Their sense of morality is vastly different, and probably what we would consider to be amoral on the most extreme level. And nobody who's a theist and part of an organized religion wants this. They don't want that type of a deity. And so one of the number one reasons why I reject belief in God is because it's incredibly dishonest. And if we're going to be serious about belief in God, we're not going to be part of organized religion. We might fall into the category of being a deist, but really not even that, because we always have to square with what we find in nature. We have with our concept of deity. We have to be able to put these things together so that they somehow make sense. And so, if I was actually a theist, if I was a real believer, I would actually be set against organized religion. I would be set against it because it would be false idealism, because it would be a deception. It would not be consistent or compatible with the evidence. It would be trying to posit a delusion about the nature of reality in place of reality itself. And if I was serious about knowing God, or gods or creators or engineers or organic machine, whatever it is, we would have no idea if this was the case. I would want to know what that thing or things were. I wouldn't want to posit what they were from my culture, or merely adopt the beliefs from my culture and allow those beliefs to determine what I take this being to be. I would have to allow the evidence of what I find in nature and through all existence to inform my understanding of deity, and I would consistently be set against organized religion because it would not be consistent with this process or this procedure. So my reason for rejecting belief in God above everything else is that it's incredibly dishonest, and that its dishonesty also infiltrates the world with a kind of mythology that, even though one can try to trace it to having some value in terms of progressing the species at a certain evolutionary space and time, that progression is not something that's static. It's not something that would always retain its value throughout the development of the species. But in fact, it would become a form of regression if it was held up as the ultimate ideal of what humanity should be and what humanity should embody. A thinking person should be able to transcend the mythos and to proceed into the higher forms of logic, into a logos, a real logos, which is not going to be informed by a mythos and be pulled down by a mythos, but wants to continue to expand its understanding as much as it possibly can so that it can comprehend complexity and then through that comprehension of complexity, obtain a greater knowledge so that the species can interact with nature in such a way that we can try to make a more qualitative life for ourselves and our children.